Adivasi is an umbrella term for a heterogeneous set of ethnic and tribal groups claimed to be the aboriginal population of India. They comprise a substantial indigenous minority of the population of India. The same term Adivasi is used for the ethnic minorities of Bangladesh and the native Vedda people of Sri Lanka. The word is also used in the same sense in Nepal as is another word janajati, although the political context differed historically under the Shah and Rana dynasties. Adivasi societies are particularly present in Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Gujarat, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal and some northeastern states, and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Many smaller tribal groups are quite sensitive to ecological degradation caused by modernization. Both commercial forestry and intensive agriculture have proved destructive to the forests that had endured swidden agriculture for many centuries. Connotations of the word Adivasi, although terms such as Otavika, Banavasi, or Girejan are also used for the tribes of India, Adivasi carries the specific meaning of being the original and autochthonous inhabitants of a given region and was specifically coined for that purpose in the 1930s. Over time, unlike the terms aborigines, or tribes, the word Adivasi has developed a connotation of past autonomy which was disrupted during the British colonial period in India and has not been restored. In Nepal, the infiltration of Khas people from west to east through the Middle Hills, then the consolidation of dozens of petty kingdoms by the Shahs followed by the usurpation by the Ranas brought indigenous nationalities under orthodox Hindu rule and then codified inferior social and political status into a corpus of law known as Mulukian. Although the Shah kings were restored to power in the revolution of 1950, they still governed mostly for and through high caste Bahuns, Thakuris, Kshatris and Nawars. Enfranchisement of Adivasis except new as seldom advanced beyond lip service. This produced grievances that were instrumental in the Nepalese civil war, where the rank and file of guerrilla fighters were largely Adivasi. Thus in Nepal, there are no historical parallels to British interference with Orthodox Hindu discrimination, nor was there much resembling India's significantly effective post-independence efforts to improve the lot of Adivasis. In India, opposition to usage of the term is varied, and it has been argued that the original inhabitant contention is based on the fact that they have no land and are therefore asking for a land reform. They argue that they have been oppressed by the superior group, and that therefore they require and demand a reward and more specifically a land reform. In northeast India, the term Adivasi applies only to the tea tribes imported from central India during colonial times, while all tribal groups refer collectively to themselves by using the English word tribes. Scheduled tribes. The Constitution of India, Article 366 defines scheduled tribes as such tribes or tribal communities or part of all groups within such tribes or tribal communities as are deemed under Article 342 to the scheduled tribes for the purposes of this Constitution. In Article 342, the procedure to be followed for specification of a scheduled tribe is prescribed. However, it does not contain the criterion for the specification of any community as scheduled tribe. An often used criterion is based on attributes such as geographical isolation they live in cloistered, exclusive, remote and inhospitable areas such as hills and forests. Backwardness their livelihood is based on primitive agriculture, a low-value closed economy with a low level of technology that leads to their poverty. They have low levels of literacy and health. Distinctive culture, language and religion communities have developed their own distinctive culture, language and religion. Shyness of contact they have a marginal degree of contact with other cultures and people. Particularly vulnerable tribal groups. The scheduled tribe groups who were identified as more isolated from the wider community and who maintain a distinctive cultural identity have been categorized as particularly vulnerable tribal groups by the government at the center. So far 75 tribal communities have been identified as particularly vulnerable tribal groups in different states of India. These hunting, food gathering, and some agricultural communities, have been identified as lesser acculturated tribes among the tribal population groups and in need of special programs for their sustainable development. the tribes are awakening and demanding their rights for special reservation quota for them. Geographical Overview. There is a substantial list of scheduled tribes in India recognized as tribal under the Constitution of India. Tribal people constitute 8.6% of the nation's total population, over 104 million people according to the 2011 census. One concentration lives in a belt along the Himalayas stretching through Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, and Uttarakhand in the west, to Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, Manipur, and Nagaland in the northeast. In the northeastern states of Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Mizoram, and Nagaland, more than 90% of the population is tribal. However, in the remaining northeast states of Assam, Manipur, Sikkim, and Tripura, tribal peoples form between 20 and 30% of the population. Another concentration lives in the hilly areas of central India. In this belt, which is bounded by the Narmada River to the north and the Godavari River to the southeast, tribal peoples occupy the slopes of the region's mountains. Other tribals, including the Santals, live in Jharkhand and West Bengal. Central Indian states have the country's largest tribes, and, taken as a whole, roughly 75% of the total tribal population live there, although the tribal population there accounts for only around 10% of the region's total population. There are smaller numbers of tribal people in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala in South India. In western India in Gujarat and Rajasthan, and in the Union territories of Lakshadweep and the Andaman Islands and Nicobar Islands. About 1% of the populations of Kerala and Tamil Nadu are tribal, whereas about 6% in Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka are members of tribes. The peopling of India. The concept of original inhabitant is directly related to the initial peopling of India, which, due to the debate on topics such as the Indo-Aryan migration hypothesis, has been a contentious area of research and discourse. Some anthropologists hypothesize that the region was settled by multiple human migrations over tens of millennia, which makes it even harder to select certain groups as being truly aboriginal. One narrative, largely based on genetic research, describes Negritos, similar to the Andamanese Adivasis of today, as the first humans to colonize India, likely 65,000 years before present. 60% of all Indians share the mtDNA haplogroup M, which is universal among Andamanese Islander Adivasis and might be a genetic legacy of the postulated first Indians. Some anthropologists theorize that these settlers were displaced by invading Austroasiatic-speaking Australoid people, and Adivasi tribes such as the Irulas trace their origins to that displacement. The Arain Adivasi tribe of eastern India and the Korka tribe of western India are considered to be examples of groups of Australoid origin. Subsequent to the Australoids, most anthropologists and geneticists agree that Caucasoids and Mongoloids immigrated into India, the Dravidians possibly from Iran, the Indo-Aryans possibly from the Central Asian steppes and the Tibeto-Burmans possibly from the Himalayan and northeastern borders of the subcontinent. None of these hypotheses is free from debate and disagreement. Ethnic origins and linguistic affiliations in India match only inexactly, however, while the Arain Adivasis are classified as an Australoid group, their language, called Kuruk, is Dravidian. Khasis and Nicobaris are considered to be Mongoloid groups and the Munda and Santals are Australoid groups, but all four speak Austroasiatic languages. The Bhils and Gans are frequently classified as Australoid groups, yet Bhil languages are Indo-European and the Gondi language is Dravidian. Also, in post-colonial India, tribal languages suffered huge setbacks with the formation of linguistic states after 1956 under the States Reorganization Act. For example, under state-sponsored educational pressure, Irula children are being taught Tamil and a sense of shame has begun to be associated with speaking the Irula language among some children and educated adults. Similarly, the Santals are gradually adopting languages of the areas inhabited, like Oriya in Odisha, Hindi in Bihar and Bengali in West Bengal. Mughal and colonial periods, Mughal period, although considered uncivilized and primitive, Adivasis were usually not held to be intrinsically impure by surrounding casted Hindu populations, unlike Dalits, who were. Thus, The Adivasi origins of Varmaki, who composed the Ramayana, were acknowledged, as were the origins of Adivasi tribes such as the Grazier and Bailala, which descended from mixed Rajput and Bhil marriages. Unlike the subjugation of the Dalits, the Adivasis often enjoyed autonomy and, depending on region, evolved mixed hunter-gatherer and farming economies, controlling their lands as a joint patrimony of the tribe. In some areas, securing Adivasi approval and support was considered crucial by local rulers, and larger Adivasi groups were able to sustain their own kingdoms in central India. The Gund Rajas of Garha Mandla and Chanda are examples of an Adivasi aristocracy that ruled in this region, and were not only the hereditary leaders of their Gund subjects, but also held sway over substantial communities of non-tribals who recognized them as their feudal lords. This relative autonomy and collective ownership of Adivasi land by Adivasis was severely disrupted by the advent of the Mughals in the early 16th century. Rebellions against Mughal authority are the Bhil Rebellion of 1632 and the Bhil Gund insurrection of 1643, which were both crushed by Mughal soldiers. British period. From the very early days of British rule, the tribesmen resented the British encroachments upon their tribal system. They were found resisting or supporting their brethren of Tamar and Jalda in rebellion. Nor did their Raja welcome the British administrative innovations. Beginning in the 18th century, the British added to the consolidation of feudalism in India, first under the Jagadhari system and then under the Zamindari system. Beginning with the permanent settlement imposed by the British in Bengal and Bihar, which later became the template for a deepening of feudalism throughout India, the older social and economic system in the country began to alter radically. Land, both forest areas belonging to Adivasis and settled farmland belonging to non-Adivasi peasants, was rapidly made the legal property of British-designated zamindars, who in turn moved to extract the maximum economic benefit possible from their newfound property and subjects. Adivasi lands sometimes experienced an influx of non-local settlers, often brought from far away by the zamindars to better exploit local land, forest and labor. Deprived of the forests and resources they traditionally depended on and sometimes coerced to pay taxes, many Adivasis were forced to borrow at usurious rates from money lenders, often the zamindars themselves. When they were unable to pay, that forced them to become bonded laborers for the zamindars. Often, far from paying off the principal of their debt, they were unable even to offset the compounding interest, and this was made the justification for their children working for the zamindar after the death of the initial borrower. In the case of the Andamanese Adivasis, long isolated from the outside world in autonomous societies, mere contact with outsiders was often sufficient to set off deadly epidemics in tribal populations, and it is alleged that some sections of the British government directly attempted to destroy some tribes. Land dispossession and subjugation by British and zamindar interests resulted in a number of Adivasi revolts in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, such as the Santalhul of 1855–56. Although these were suppressed ruthlessly by the governing British authority, partial restoration of privileges to Adivasi elites and some leniency in tax burdens resulted in relative calm, despite continuing and widespread dispossession, from the late 19th century onwards. The economic deprivation, in some cases, triggered internal Adivasi migrations within India that would continue for another century, including as labour for the emerging tea plantations in Assam. Participation in Indian independence movement. There were tribal reform and rebellion movements during the period of the British Empire, some of which also participated in the Indian independence movement or attacked mission posts. There were several Adivasis in the Indian independence movement including Dharantur Buan, Laxman Naik, Jantia Bil, Bangaru Devi and Rima Vasiv. List of rebellions. During the period of British rule, India saw the rebellions of several backward castes, mainly tribals that revolted against British rule. These were Great Kiki Invasion of 1860s, Holpa Rebellion, Kakma Rebellion, Chua Rebellion in Bengal, Bhopal Page-Nam Struggle, Kurda Rebellion in Odisha, Bhil Rebellion, Paralkot Rebellion, Tarapa Rebellion, Maria Rebellion, First Freedom Struggle, Bhil Rebellion, begun by Tantia Topin Banswara, Koi Revolt, Gund Rebellion, begun by Ramji Gund in Adilabad, Meria Rebellion, Rani Rebellion, Bumkal, the Kiki Uprising Manipur, First Rampa Rebellion, Visagapashanam, Second Rampa Rebellion, Visakhapatnam Dist. Santhal Revolt, Munda Rebellion, Tribal Classification Criteria and Demands. Population complexities, and the controversies surrounding ethnicity and language in India, sometimes make the official recognition of groups as Adivasis political and contentious. However, regardless of their language family affiliations, Australoid and Negrito groups that have survived as distinct forest, mountain or island-dwelling tribes in India and are often classified as Adivasi. The relatively autonomous Mongoloid tribal groups of northeastern India, who are mostly Austroasiatic or Tibeto-Burman speakers, are also considered to be Adivasis. This area comprises 7.5% of India's land area by 20% of its Adivasi population. However, not all autonomous northeastern groups are considered Adivasis. For instance, the Tibeto-Burman speaking Meitei of Manipur were once tribal but, having been settled for many centuries, are caste Hindus. It is also difficult, for a given social grouping, to definitively decide whether it is a caste or a tribe. A combination of internal social organization, relationship with other groups, self-classification and perception by other groups has to be taken into account to make a categorization, which is at best inexact and open to doubt. These categorizations have been diffused for thousands of years, and even ancient formulators of caste discriminatory legal codes were unable to come up with clean distinctions. Demands for tribal classification, an additional difficulty in deciding whether a group meets the criteria to be Adivasi or not are the aspirational movements created by the federal and state benefits, including job and educational reservations, enjoyed by groups listed as scheduled tribes. In Manipur, Meitei commentators have pointed to the lack of scheduled tribe status as a key economic disadvantage for Meiteis competing for jobs against groups that are classified as scheduled tribes. In Assam, Rabongshi representatives have demanded scheduled tribe status as well. In Rajasthan, the Gujar community has demanded street status, even blockading the national capital of Delhi to press their demand. However, the government of Rajasthan declined the Gujars' demand, stating the Gujars are treated as upper caste and are by no means a tribe. In several cases, these claims to tribalhood are disputed by tribes who are already listed in the schedule and fear economic losses if more powerful groups are recognized as scheduled tribes. For instance, the Rabongshi demand faces resistance from the Bodo tribe, and the Miena tribe has vigorously opposed Gujar aspirations to be recognized as a scheduled tribe. Endogamy, exogamy and ethnogenesis. Part of the challenge is that the endogamous nature of tribes is also conformed to by the vast majority of Hindu castes. Indeed, many historians and anthropologists believe that caste endogamy reflects the once tribal origins of the various groups who now constitute the settled Hindu castes. Another defining feature of caste Hindu society, which is often used to contrast them with Muslim and other social groupings, is lineage clan and village exogamy. However, these in-marriage taboos are also held ubiquitously among tribal groups, and do not serve as reliable differentiating markers between caste and tribe. Again, this could be an ancient import from tribal society into settled Hindu castes. Interestingly, tribes such as the Muslim Gujars of Kashmir and the Kalash of Pakistan observe these exogamous traditions in common with caste Hindus and non-Kashmiri Adivasis, though their surrounding Muslim populations do not. Some anthropologists, however, draw a distinction between tribes who have continued to be tribal and tribes that have been absorbed into caste society in terms of the breakdown of tribal boundaries, and the proliferation of new mixed caste groups. In other words, ethnogenesis in tribes occurs through a fission process, whereas with settled castes it usually occurs through intermixture. Other criteria, unlike castes, which form part of a complex and interrelated local economic exchange system, tribes tend to form self-sufficient economic units. For most tribal people, land use rights traditionally derive simply from tribal membership. Tribal society tends to the egalitarian, with its leadership based on ties of kinship and personality rather than on hereditary status. tribes typically consist of segmentary lineages whose extended families provide the basis for social organization and control. Tribal religion recognizes no authority outside the tribe. Any of these criteria may not apply in specific instances. Language does not always give an accurate indicator of tribal or caste status. Especially in regions of mixed population, many tribal groups have lost their original languages and simply speak local or regional languages. In parts of Assam an area historically divided between warring tribes and villages increased contact among villages began during the colonial period, and has accelerated since independence in 1947. A pidgin Assam is developed, whereas educated tribal members learned Hindi and, in the late 20th century, English. Self-identification and group loyalty do not provide unfailing markers of tribal identity either. In the case of stratified tribes, the loyalties of clan, kin, and family may well predominate over those of tribe. In addition, tribes cannot always be viewed as people living apart. The degree of isolation of various tribes has varied tremendously. The Guns, Santals, and Bulls traditionally have dominated the regions in which they have lived. Moreover, tribal society is not always more egalitarian than the rest of the rural populace. Some of the larger tribes, such as the Guns, are highly stratified. The apparently wide fluctuation in estimates of South Asia's tribal population through the 20th century gives a sense of how unclear the distinction between tribal and non-tribal can be. India's 1931 census enumerated 22 million tribal people. In 1941 only 10 million were counted, but by 1961 some 30 million and in 1991 nearly 68 million tribal members were included. The differences among the figures reflect changing census criteria and the economic incentives individuals have to maintain or reject classification as a tribal member. These gyrations of census data serve to underline the complex relationship between caste and tribe. Although, in theory, these terms represent different ways of life and ideal types, in reality they stand for a continuum of social groups. In areas of substantial contact between tribes and castes, social and cultural pressures have often tended to move tribes in the direction of becoming castes over a period of years. Tribal peoples with ambitions for social advancement in Indian society at large have tried to gain the classification of caste for their tribes. On occasion, an entire tribe or part of a tribe joined a Hindu sect and thus entered the caste system en masse. If a specific tribe engaged in practices that Hindus deemed polluting, the tribe's status when it was assimilated into the caste hierarchy would be affected. Religion. The majority of Adivasi practice Hinduism and Christianity. During the last 2 decades Adivasi from Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand have converted to Protestant groups. Adivasi beliefs vary by tribe, and are usually different from the historical Vedic religion, with its monistic underpinnings, Indo-European deities, lack of idol worship and lack of a concept of reincarnation. Hinduism, Adivasi roots of modern Hinduism. Some historians and anthropologists assert that much of what constitutes folk Hinduism today is actually descended from an amalgamation of Adivasi faiths, idol worship practices and deities, rather than the original Indo-Aryan faith. This also includes the sacred status of certain animals such as monkeys, cows, peacocks, cobras and elephants and plants such as the sacred fig, Ocimum tenuiflorum and Isadirota indica, which may once have held totemic importance for certain Adivasi tribes. Adivasi Sants, a Sant is an Indian holy man, and a title of a devotee or ascetic, especially in North and East India. Generally a holy or saintly person is referred to as a Mahatma, Paramahamsa, or Swami, or given the prefix Shri or Srila before their name. The term is sometimes misrepresented in English as Hindu saint, although Sant is unrelated to saint. Sant Buddhapagat led the Kul insurrection aimed against tax imposed on Mundas by Muslim rulers. Sant Dira or Kanapa Narayana, too, one of 63 Narayana Shaivite Sants, a hunter from whom Lord Shiva gladly accepted food offerings. It is said that he poured water from his mouth on the Shivlingam and offered the Lord swine flesh. 3. Sant Dudhalinath, Koli, Gujarati, a 17th or 18th century devotee, Sant Ganga Narain, led the Bhumij revolt aimed against missionaries and British colonialists. Sant Gurnari Velmuthji, Kohli, Gujarati of Janagod, a 17th or 18th century devotee, Sant Guru Kali Charan Brahma or Guru Brahma, a Bodo who's founded the Brahma Dharma aimed against missionaries and colonialists. The Brahma Dharma movement sought to unite peoples of all religions to worship God together and survives even today. Sant Kalu Dev, Punjab, related with fisherman community Nishadha, Sant Kibara, ethnic Gujarati, Kohli tribal of Sasa, taught for over 35 years, and had 20,000 followers in his time. Sant Jatra Arain, led the Tana Bhagat movement aimed against the missionaries and British colonialists. Sant Shri Koya Bhagat, Kohli, Gujarati, a 17th or 18th century devotee, Sant Tantya Mama, a bill after whom a movement is named after the Jananak Tantya bill, Sant Tirumangai Alva, Kala, composed the 6 Vedangas in beautiful Tamil verse. 4. Sages, Bhaktaraj Bajo Das, Kohli, Gujarati, a 17th or 18th century devotee, Bhakta Shibari, a Nishadha woman who offered Sri Rama and Sri Lakshmana her half-eaten bare fruit, which they gratefully accepted when they were searching for Sri Sita Devi in the forest. Madan Bhagat, Kohli, Gujarati, a 17th or 18th century devotee, Saini Kanji Swami, Kohli, Gujarati, a 17th or 18th century devotee, Bhaktaraj Vairam, Kohli, Gujarati, a 17th or 18th century devotee, Maharishis, Maharshi Maitanga Bill, Guru of Bhakta Shibari. In fact, Chandalas are often addressed as a Maitanga unregistered trademark in passages like Varaha Purana 1.139.91, Maharshi Valmiki, Kirata Bill, composed the Ramayana. He is considered to be an avatar in the Valmiki community. Avatars, Birsa Bhagwan or Birsa Munda, considered an avatar of Kasrakura. People approached him as Singbunga, the sun god. His sect included Christian converts. 5. He and his clan, the Mundas, were connected with Vaishnavite traditions as they were influenced by Sri Chaitanya. 6. Birsa was very close to the Panna brothers Vaishnavites. Kirata the form of Lord Shiva as a hunter. It is mentioned in the Mahabharata. The Karpalikevu Sri Mahadeva temple, Kerala adores Lord Shiva in this avatar and is known to be one of the oldest surviving temples in Bharat. Vatakumakan, the son of Lord Karata. Kaladutaka or Vayakunthanatha, Kala, avatar of Lord Vishnu. 7. Other tribals and Hinduism. Some Hindus believe that Indian tribals are close to the romantic ideal of the ancient Sylvan culture of the Vedic people. Madhav Sadashiv Golwalkar said, the tribals can be given Yaja +or- Opava registered trademark tar. They should be given equal rights and footings in the matter of religious rights, in temple worship, in the study of Vedas, and in general, in all our social and religious affairs. This is the only right solution for all the problems of casteism found nowadays in our Hindu society. At the Lingaraj temple in Bhubaneswar, there are Brahmin and Beda priests. The Bedas have the most intimate contact with the deity of the temple, and only they can bathe and adorn it. The bulls are mentioned in the Mahabharata. The Bilboy Ekalavya's teacher was Drona, and he had the honor to be invited to Yudhisthira's Rajasaya Yaja at Indraprastha. Indian tribals were also part of royal armies in the Ramayana and in the Yuddha Shastra. Shibari was a Bil woman who offered Rama and Lakshmana jujubes when they were searching for Sita in the forest. Maitanga, a Bil, became a Brahmana. Sana. The Munda, Ho, Santhal and Arain tribe followed the Sana religion, where Sana means sacred grove. Their religion is based on the oral traditions passed from generation to generation. It strongly believes in one God, the Great Spirit. Traditionally, the women were not allowed into the Sana places of worship, but Akhil Bharatiya Sana Dharma Samiti has campaigned against this custom. Demands for a separate religious code. Some Adivasi organizations have demanded that a distinct religious code be listed for Adivasis in the 2011 census of India. The All India Adivasi Conference was held on 1 and 2 January 2011 at Burnpur, Asansol, West Bengal. 750 delegates were present from all parts of India and cast their votes for religion code as follows: Saridharma Euro 632, Sana Euro 51, Khairwalism Euro 14 and other religions Euro 03. Census of India. Tribal system. Tribals are not part of the caste system, and usually constitute egalitarian societies. Christian tribals do not automatically lose their traditional tribal rules. When in 1891 a missionary asked 150 Munda Christians to interdine with people of different rank, only 20 Christians did so, and many converts lost their new faith. Father Hanby concluded on this episode that these rules are not pagan, but a sign of national sentiment and pride, and wrote, "On the contrary, while proclaiming the equality of all men before God, we now tell them, preserve your race pure, keep your customs, refrain from eating with lowers, Churis and other people of lower rank. To become good Christians, it is not required." However, many scholars argue that the claim that tribals are an egalitarian society in contrast to a caste-based society is a part of a larger political agenda by some to maximize any differences from tribal and urban societies. According to scholar Coenraad Elst, caste practices and social taboos among Indian tribals date back to antiquity. The Munda tribals not only practice tribal endogamy and commensality, but also observe a janajati division within the tribe, buttressed by notions of social pollution, a mythological explanation and harsh punishments. A Munda Catholic theologian testifies, the tribals of Chota Nagpur are an endogamous tribe. They usually do not marry outside the tribal community, because to them the tribe is sacred. The way to salvation is the tribe. Among the Santals, it is tabooed to marry outside the tribe or inside one's clan, just as Hindus marry inside their caste and outside their gotra. More precisely, to protect their tribal solidarity, the Santals have very stringent marriage laws. A Santal cannot marry a non-Santal or a member of his own clan. The former is considered as a threat to the tribe's integrity, while the latter is considered incestuous. Among the Ho of Chota Nagpur, the trespasses which occasion the exclusion from the tribe without chance of appeal, are essentially those concerning endogamy and exogamy. Interdining has also been prohibited by many Indian tribal peoples. Education, extending the system of primary education into tribal areas and reserving places for tribal children in middle and high schools and higher education institutions are central to government policy, but efforts to improve a tribe's educational status have had mixed results. Recruitment of qualified teachers and determination of the appropriate language of instruction also remain troublesome. Commission after commission on the language question has called for instruction, at least at the primary level, in the student's native language. In some regions, tribal children entering school must begin by learning the official regional language, often one completely unrelated to their tribal language. Many tribal schools are plagued by high dropout rates. Children attend for the first 3 to 4 years of primary school and gain a smattering of knowledge, only to lapse into illiteracy later. Few who enter continue up to the 10th grade. Of those who do, few manage to finish high school. Therefore, very few are eligible to attend institutions of higher education, where the high rate of attrition continues. Members of agrarian tribes like the Guns often are reluctant to send their children to school, needing them, they say, to work in the fields. On the other hand, in those parts of the Northeast where tribes have generally been spared the wholesale onslaught of outsiders, schooling has helped tribal people to secure political and economic benefits. The education system there has provided a core of highly trained tribal members in the professions and high-ranking administrative posts. An academy for teaching and preserving Adivasi languages and culture was established in 1999 by the Basha Research and Publication Center. The Adivasi Academy is located at Jharkhand, Gujarat. Economy: most tribes are concentrated in heavily forested areas that combine inaccessibility with limited political or economic significance. Historically, the economy of most tribes was subsistence agriculture or hunting and gathering. Tribal members traded with outsiders for the few necessities they lacked, such as salt and iron. a few local Hindu craftsmen might provide such items as cooking utensils. In the early 20th century, however, large areas fell into the hands of non-tribals, on account of improved transportation and communications. Around 1900, many regions were opened by the government to settlement through a scheme by which inward migrants received ownership of land free in return for cultivating it. For tribal people, however, land was often viewed as a common resource, free to whoever needed it. By the time tribals accepted the necessity of obtaining formal land titles, they had lost the opportunity to lay claim to lands that might rightfully have been considered theirs. The colonial and post-independence regimes belatedly realized the necessity of protecting tribals from the predations of outsiders and prohibited the sale of tribal lands. Although an important loophole in the form of land leases was left open, tribes made some gains in the mid-20th century, and some land was returned to tribal peoples despite obstruction by local police and land officials. In the 1970s, tribal peoples came again under intense land pressure, especially in central India. Migration into tribal lands increased dramatically, as tribal people lost title to their lands in many ways: a lease, forfeiture from debts, or bribery of land registry officials. Other non-tribals simply squatted, or even lobbied governments to classify them as tribal to allow them to compete with the formally established tribes. In any case, many tribal members became landless laborers in the 1960s and 1970s, and regions that a few years earlier had been the exclusive domain of tribes had an increasingly mixed population of tribals and non-tribals. Government efforts to evict non-tribal members from illegal occupation have proceeded slowly. When evictions occur at all, those ejected are usually members of poor, lower castes. Improved communications, roads with motorized traffic, and more frequent government intervention figured in the increased contact that tribal peoples had with outsiders. Commercial highways and cash crops frequently drew non-tribal people into remote areas. By the 1960s and 1970s, the resident non-tribal shopkeeper was a permanent feature of many tribal villages. Since shopkeepers often sell goods on credit, many tribal members have been drawn deeply into debt or mortgaged their land. Merchants also encourage tribals to grow cash crops, which increases tribal dependence on the market for basic necessities. Indebtedness is so extensive that although such transactions are illegal, traders sometimes sell their debtors to other merchants, much like indentured peons. The final blow for some tribes has come when non-tribals, through political jockeying, have managed to gain legal tribal status, that is, to be listed as a scheduled tribe. Tribes in the Himalayan foothills have not been as hard-pressed by the intrusions of non-tribal. Historically, their political status was always distinct from the rest of India. Until the British colonial period, there was little effective control by any of the empires centered in peninsular India. The region was populated by autonomous feuding tribes. The British, in efforts to protect the sensitive northeast frontier, followed a policy dubbed the Inner Line. Non-tribal people were allowed into the areas only with special permission. Post-independence governments have continued the policy, protecting the Himalayan tribes as part of the strategy to secure the border with China. Government policies on forest reserves have affected tribal peoples profoundly. Government efforts to reserve forests have precipitated armed resistance on the part of the tribal peoples involved. Intensive exploitation of forests has often meant allowing outsiders to cut large areas of trees, and ultimately replacing mixed forests capable of sustaining tribal life with single-product plantations. Non-tribals have frequently bribed local officials to secure effective use of reserved forest lands. The northern tribes have thus been sheltered from the kind of exploitation that those elsewhere in South Asia have suffered. In Arunachal Pradesh, for example, tribal members control commerce and most lower-level administrative posts. Government construction projects in the region have provided tribes with a significant source of cash. Some tribes have made rapid progress through the education system. Instruction was begun in Assamese but was eventually changed to Hindi. By the early 1980s, English was taught at most levels. Northeastern tribal people have thus enjoyed a certain measure of social mobility. the continuing economic alienation and exploitation of many Adivasis was highlighted as a systematic failure by the Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in a 2009 conference of chief ministers of all 29 Indian states, where he also cited this as a major cause of the Naxalite unrest that has affected areas such as the Red Corridor. Notable Adivasis: Jewel Ram, politician, BJP; Ram Vishwanitam, politician, BJP; MC Mary Kom, boxer; Dilip Turkey, former captain, Indian hockey team; Birsa Munda, freedom fighter; Dayamani Bala, journalist, activist; Baichung Bhusha, former captain, Indian football team; Albert Ekka, Param Vichakra; Birendra Lakra, Indian hockey team; C.K. Jainu, social activist. Gallery, some portraits of Adivasi people. See also. References: Tribes of India, A Country Study. Federal Research Division of the Library of Congress of the USA. This article incorporates text from this source, which is in the public domain. Further reading: Russell, R.V., The Tribes and Castes of the Central Provinces of India, London, 1916. Elst, Coenrod. Who is a Hindu? ISBN 81-85990-74-3, Raj, Aditya and Papaya Raj. Linguistic Deculturation and the Importance of Popular Education Among the Guns in India. Adult Education in Development 62, 55 Euro 61, vindicated by Time, the Neogy Committee Report, Tribal Heritage of India, by Shyama Charan Dube, Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Indian Council of Social Science Research, Anthropological Survey of India. Published by Vickers Pub. House, 1977. ISBN 0-7069-0531-8. Tribal Movements in India, by Kumar Suresh Singh. Published by Monohore, 1982. Tribal Society in India, An Anthropo-Historical Perspective, by Kumar Suresh Singh. Published by Monohore, 1985. External links: Adivasi Yuva Shakti Euro Adivasi Intellectuals Group, CEPCE India, Menet, Sant Namdeo Maharaj, Adivasi Coordination Group in Germany, Adivasi Picture Collection at Kamat.com, People's Tribunal demands a sustainable model for tribes, Tej Prakash, One World South Asia.